It's strange how the most profound revolutions of the soul happen without an audience. No one claps. There's no dramatic music. But inside you, something begins to realign, quietly, patiently, like a melody you forgot you knew, now playing again. There's no grand announcement, just a subtle knowing, a soft shift from confusion to clarity. Real transformation doesn't explode into your life. It seeps in like light through a crack in the wall. You don't chase it. You simply become still enough to receive it. You start noticing things. Your old habits don't grip you the same way. What once sparked rage or despair now lands differently. You pause, you breathe. And in that breath, you find something new, awareness. You don't suppress emotions, you respond to them. You're not avoiding conflict, you're choosing peace. Jung taught that becoming whole is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering what's always been true beneath the noise. Your essence never needed fixing, just uncovering. You stop craving external proof of progress. There's no more need to justify your evolution or explain your stillness. You begin to realize your transformation isn't something to announce, it's something you live. The real evidence is in the calm behind your eyes, the way your voice softens instead of hardening, the way your energy no longer enters every room begging to be seen. You don't need to dominate. You've stopped living in reaction. You've started responding from alignment. Some days the world won't notice your shift. You'll go about your life as if nothing changed. But inside, your soul has rewired itself. Your inner landscape feels different. Like a home you've cleaned after years of clutter. The pain is still there, but it no longer shouts. The fear visits, but it no longer rules. And that's the miracle no one talks about. When healing doesn't erase your scars, it simply takes away their power to control your steps. In that newfound presence, something extraordinary begins. You stop running from silence. You sit with it. You honor it. And slowly, you trust it. You realize the absence of chaos isn't emptiness, it's alignment. And from that quiet space, everything changes. Not loudly, not suddenly, but completely. There comes a moment when your past stops being your identity and becomes just a story. You remember it, but it no longer defines you. The pain is still there in memory, but it no longer bleeds. You can revisit what happened without drowning in it. That's when you know you've stepped into a different inner space, one where observation replaces obsession. You don't have to explain your scars anymore. You don't need anyone to understand the pain that shaped you. You've stopped arguing with your own history. You begin to see your journey with a kind of sacred distance. It's not detachment, it's integration. The wounds you once narrated like a badge now feel quiet, almost irrelevant. You're not denying the past. You're including it in your wholeness. That shift is subtle but profound. You used to relive your stories to feel something. Now, you live your present to feel free. And that freedom doesn't require validation. It requires honesty. You're no longer trapped by pride or guilt. You don't need your achievements to feel worthy or your suffering to feel real. Jung believed that maturity as recognizing your story was never meant to imprison you. It was meant to awaken you. And now, your sense of self is no longer held together by proving or performing. It's held by presence. Your life isn't a reaction to the past anymore. It's a conscious creation of the now. The way you speak about yourself begins to change. Old phrases like "this is just who I am" start to dissolve. Not because you're forcing them out, but because they simply stop making sense. You realize you're not fixed. You're evolving. You've stopped clinging to the roles you once played for survival. The labels you used to wear proudly now feel like costumes from another life. You've outgrown them, and you're okay with that. This quiet shedding of identity is the beginning of something sacred. You're not escaping your past. You're finally walking through it with open eyes. The parts of you that once screamed for attention are now held with compassion, not fear. And that, more than anything, is the evidence of growth. when your past stops being a weight and becomes a witness to your strength. There was a time when your emotions dictated everything. A look, a word, a silence. Each one could trigger a storm inside you. You weren't reacting to what was happening now. You were reacting to everything you hadn't healed, and that's exhausting. But something changed. You began to notice the pause, a breath, a moment of stillness between stimulus and reaction. That's where your freedom lives. And for the first time you realized you don't have to be a prisoner of your own patterns. You've started to see emotions not as problems to fix, but as messages to decode. Anger isn't always rage. It's a signal. Sadness isn't always weakness. It's a doorway. Fear doesn't always mean stop. Sometimes it means pay attention. You've learned not to run from these feelings, but to welcome them like visitors who bring news from your deeper self. You don't shut the door. You listen. But you also don't let them take over the house. Carl Jung said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. Now, you're catching yourself. You see the loop before you fall in. You feel the tension rise, but you don't let it dictate your next step. You observe, and in that observation you reclaim your authority. That's not denial. That's power. The kind of power that doesn't need to control others because it has learned to govern the self. This shift doesn't mean you've stopped feeling deeply. In fact, you feel more than ever. But the chaos no longer pulls you under. You float. You witness. You make room for complexity without losing your center. The storms come, but your roots are deeper now. You don't avoid discomfort. You simply don't let it shape your choices anymore. And that level of emotional sovereignty? It's the foundation of true peace. Because when emotions stop being your masters, they become your allies. You move through life with more clarity, more grace. You're not trying to protect yourself from feeling. You're finally learning how to feel without breaking. That's the real alchemy. The old you reacted. The new you responds. And in that response, something sacred unfolds. Your true self finally has room to breathe. There comes a point when the story you've told yourself begins to unravel, not in panic, but in quiet relief. The old statements like, "This is just how I am," start to sound more like excuses than truths. You feel less attached to defending who you've been and more curious about who you're becoming. The identity you built for survival starts to feel tight, like clothes that no longer fit. You stop asking how to be more impressive and start asking how to be more real. And that shift, however subtle, carries the weight of a breakthrough. You begin to see that much of who you thought you were wasn't a conscious choice. It was a response to fear, pressure, and pain. You wore strength like armor and silence like a disguise. But now, the soul underneath is rising. The voice you buried beneath expectations begins to speak, softly but firmly. And with each moment of truth, the mask starts to fall. Not dramatically, just gently, like a leaf finally letting go of the branch it no longer needs. Carl Jung taught that individuation, the journey to wholeness, is not about becoming better. It's about becoming more authentic. That means peeling away the labels, roles, and personas you've used to feel secure. Letting go of the helper, the warrior, the winner, and simply being. And yes, that kind of honesty is terrifying at first, because it means facing yourself without protection. But it's also where peace begins. Not performance, not perfection, just presence. You begin to notice that the labels you once clung to now feel outdated. You no longer want to be the reliable one if it means betraying your own needs. You stop trying to fit into spaces that never respected your essence. You stop seeing change as inconsistency and start seeing it as growth. Your soul doesn't want a resume, it wants freedom. It doesn't need recognition, it needs alignment. And in honoring that, you finally give yourself permission to outgrow everything that made you shrink. And this transformation doesn't scream. It doesn't beg for acknowledgement. It lives in your quiet confidence, in the way you let people misinterpret you without rushing to correct them. in how you release relationships that no longer align, not in anger, but in grace, in how you've stopped performing and started existing. That's when you know. You're not living from a curated identity, you're living from your truth. And from that place, the world begins to relate to you differently. When you stop needing others to fill your gaps, your relationships transform. You're no longer entering connections with silent contracts, those unconscious expectations that someone else will save you, complete you, or validate your worth. You begin to meet people from wholeness, not from wounds. And that changes everything. The energy of need is replaced by the energy of presence. You're not asking to be saved. You're simply showing up as you are. You no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. You stop mistaking chaos for connection. The relationships that once felt magnetic but left you drained begin to lose their pull. Why? Because you've stopped resonating with pain. You're not addicted to the drama anymore. You want peace now. Real peace. The kind that doesn't demand explanations or prove its worth through conflict. The kind that simply exists quietly, like a river that's found its path. And because you've stopped chasing, something beautiful happens. You begin to attract. People who match your new vibration start appearing, not always loudly but meaningfully. And some people will leave. Some will fade. But you won't panic. You won't beg. Because the emptiness they leave behind no longer echoes. You've become your own safe space. Your presence doesn't beg to be noticed. It simply is. And that's enough. This shift shows up in subtle ways, in the way you no longer rush to respond just to keep the peace, in how you can sit with silence without filling it with noise, in how you protect your energy, not out of fear but out of respect for your growth. Relationships are no longer a battlefield or a performance. They become sacred mirrors, reflections of how far you've come. And if there's a truth you're ready to live starting today, let it be this. Today I choose to relate only with what nourishes my soul. If that resonates with you, write it down. Say it to yourself. Whisper it in the mirror. You're not here to survive relationships. You're here to be transformed by the right ones, and to walk away from the ones that don't honor who you're becoming. There comes a point when fear no longer holds the steering wheel. You stop making decisions based on the fear of missing out, the fear of rejection, the fear of failure. Instead, something quieter takes over, not a voice in your head, but a vibration in your chest. You begin to sense direction from within, a pull that's not loud, but steady. That's when you realize your soul has been speaking all along. You just needed to quiet the noise to hear it. You begin to step away from urgency. You stop treating life like a race. The impulse to fix everything, to have all the answers, to be on all the time starts to lose its grip. And in its place, something softer emerges. Patience. You allow things to unfold. You give yourself permission to wait without panicking. You understand now that not every door must be forced open. Some doors are meant to open only when you stop pushing. This shift doesn't mean you stop acting. It means you start aligning. You don't chase what's shiny. You choose what resonates. You no longer ask what will make me look good, but what feels right in my body and my spirit. You let go of the obsession with being understood. You make peace with being misunderstood. Because when your decisions come from your soul, they don't always make sense to others, but they feel undeniably true to you. You begin to recognize the wisdom of silence. You no longer fear it. In fact, you seek it. The spaces where no one is watching become the most sacred. The pauses between decisions, the stillness before a move. You start to hear something beneath the chatter of the mind, a knowing that comes not from facts, but from alignment. And when you follow that knowing, you stop walking in circles. You start walking with purpose. Have you ever felt your intuition speak louder than logic? That soft but unshakable inner voice that says, "Not here," or "Not yet," even when your mind says go. That's the soul. And the more you trust it, the more life begins to flow in ways you could never plan. It's not about knowing everything. It's about being connected to the part of you that already does. Most people spend their lives running from pain, numbing it, avoiding it, distracting themselves with noise, achievement, or relationships that don't touch their soul. But eventually, you realize that pain isn't your enemy, it's your invitation. The moments that once shattered you weren't punishments, they were openings, cracks where the light began to pour in, not because you were broken, but because you were finally soft enough to receive truth. You begin to see your wounds differently. You no longer ask, why did this happen to me? But what did this teach me about myself? That question changes everything. It shifts you from victimhood to awareness. Jung said that suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. And when your pain finds its place in your story, not as the main character but as a sacred teacher, you begin to heal in ways that no external solution could ever offer. You stop being afraid of discomfort. Instead, you meet it with curiosity. You allow it to show you what's still unresolved, not to shame yourself but to grow. You begin to notice patterns, triggers, moments where your reactions reveal more than the situation itself. And instead of suppressing them, you follow them to their root. That's where the transformation happens. Not on the surface, but deep in the quiet rooms of your soul where honesty lives. There's something profoundly powerful in this shift. The same pain that once left you feeling powerless now becomes the exact place where your strength was born. Not a strength that hardens you, but one that makes you tender without breaking. You realize you didn't need to avoid the pain. You needed to walk through it. And now that you have, you're not the same. You're more whole, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. What if your deepest wound is the doorway to your awakening? That pain you've tried to escape, what if it's your soul's way of calling you back home? Sit with that thought. Let it echo. Because sometimes the path to peace isn't around the suffering, it's through it. When you stop striving to be noticed, you begin to be felt. Not through effort, but through presence. There's something unshakable about someone who is at peace with themselves. They don't need to speak loudly. Their silence carries weight. Their stillness communicates what words never could. That's the kind of energy that heals without trying, because it comes from someone who has already done the work within. You no longer need to prove your growth. You embody it. You don't post your transformation, you live it. You don't convince others you've changed. You let your energy speak, and it does. People feel it in how you listen, in how you breathe, in how you no longer abandon yourself just to be accepted. That quiet power isn't performative, it's magnetic, and it only grows stronger the more aligned you become. You begin to see how rare real presence is. Most people are stuck in reaction, in persona, in defense, but you've softened into something deeper. You're no longer competing with the world, you're in communion with it. You bring peace to chaos without absorbing it. You reflect truth just by being it. Not to change others, but to remain true to yourself. And that consistency, it's healing in itself. The people who come into your life now respond to your essence, not your image. They're not drawn to your performance, they're drawn to your authenticity. And those who aren't ready may drift away. You'll let them, not out of pride, but because your peace is no longer up for negotiation. You're not here to be everything for everyone. You're here to live your truth and be a mirror for those ready to do the same. Because in the end, it's not what you say that changes lives. It's who you are when you say nothing. Your very presence becomes an offering, a reminder, a quiet invitation for others to remember who they are too. And that, more than anything, is the legacy of a soul that has integrated its shadow and now lives in light. You've come a long way, maybe longer than you even realize. To reach this point, where your pain no longer defines you, where your past no longer owns you and your reactions no longer dictate your life. This is not small, this is soul work. And it's quiet for a reason. Because the most sacred transformations don't need applause, they need space, they need stillness. And now you are that stillness. You are no longer who you were, not because you've become someone new, but because you've remembered who you truly are, and that remembering is everything. If this message touched something deep inside you, know that it's just the beginning. This space exists to walk with you, to reflect back the parts of yourself you thought you had lost. So, don't stop here. Keep exploring. Keep healing. Click on the next video appearing on your screen, and let's continue uncovering the mysteries of your mind, your heart, and the divine journey of becoming whole. You're not alone. You never were. Let's walk this path together.